All right, so we're diving into the future of clinical trials. I know the research you sent over is pretty dense, but that's why you've got us, right? We'll break down all the coolest trends and what they actually mean, not just, all the jargon. So, first things first, clinical trials.
Yeah.
They're how we test new medicines and treatments. We got to make sure they're safe and that they, actually work. We've got a stack of articles here on what's changing in the field, plus some advice for students who maybe want to get involved. And trust me, this isn't your grandma's clinical trial anymore. We're talking tech. We're talking patient power. It's a whole new ballgame.
It really is. It's a fascinating time to be in this field.
Mhm.
Yeah, clinical trials they're at a turning point. They're becoming much more integrated with our everyday lives.
Okay, so let's start with a trend that I'm hearing everywhere. Decentralized clinical trials, or DCTs. What's the big deal here?
Well, traditionally, if you wanted to participate in a trial, you had to go to a hospital or a clinic. Sometimes you'd even have to travel long distances for each visit.
Yeah.
DCTs, they change all that. They bring the trial to you, using technology to collect data remotely.
Ah, okay.
It's kind of like telehealth, but for research.
So instead of being tied to a specific location, you could participate from anywhere. That sounds incredibly convenient, but how does it actually work?
Well, it relies on a combination of things. Telehealth visits,
Mm.
wearable devices to track your health data, even home delivery of study medication.
Wow.
Yeah, it's about, creating a more flexible and patient-centered experience.
So I can see the appeal for patients,
Hmm.
especially those with busy schedules or, limited mobility. But what about the researchers? Doesn't this make their jobs harder?
Actually, it presents some unique opportunities. For one, it makes it easier to recruit a more diverse pool of participants. In the past, trials often struggled to enroll people from rural areas,
Yeah.
minority groups, or those with, limited access to healthcare. DCTs can really help to address those disparities by removing the geographical barriers.
So we're not just talking about convenience here, but potentially addressing some long-standing issues with representation in research. That's a huge step towards ensuring that new treatments are effective for everyone, not just a select few.
Exactly. And the data collected through DCTs it's richer and more nuanced because it captures a more realistic picture of people's lives.
Okay, that makes sense. But I have to imagine there are challenges too, right? Managing a trial with participants scattered all over the place? That can't be easy.
You're absolutely right. Ensuring data quality and patient safety in a remote setting. That's crucial. Researchers need to be extra vigilant about things like, data security, proper training for participants on how to use the technology, and providing adequate support when it's needed. It's a new frontier, and we're still figuring out the best practices.
That's understandable. It's like any new technology. It takes time to iron out the kinks. But the potential benefits are definitely intriguing. Now, another buzzword I keep hearing in this context is artificial intelligence, or AI. What's the role of AI in this whole clinical trial revolution?
AI and machine learning. They are poised to transform virtually every aspect of clinical research. One of the most exciting areas is drug discovery. Imagine sifting through mountains of data, genetic information, clinical records, even scientific literature, all to pinpoint the most promising drug candidates.
Right.
That's something that AI excels at.
So instead of researchers manually combing through all that information, AI can do the heavy lifting. That sounds like a huge time saver.
It is, and not just time, but resources as well. Drug development is incredibly expensive, and a lot of money is wasted on pursuing leads that ultimately go nowhere. AI can help identify those dead ends early on, freeing up resources for the more promising avenues.
That's incredibly smart. But let's get specific. Can you give me an example of how AI is being used right now in drug discovery?
Absolutely. There are companies using AI to identify potential treatments for rare diseases. These conditions often affect a small number of people, making it difficult to justify the cost of traditional drug development. AI can help analyze vast data sets to uncover patterns and potential therapeutic targets that might have been missed otherwise.
Wow, that's amazing. Using technology to bring hope to people who might otherwise be overlooked. Now, beyond drug discovery, I've also heard about AI being used to personalize treatments. What's that all about?
Well, as we learn more about the human genome and the complex interplay of genes, lifestyle, and environment, it's becoming clear that a one-size-fits-all approach to medicine, it isn't always the best solution.
Right. Just because a drug works for one person doesn't mean it'll work the same way for everyone else. Our bodies are all different.
Exactly. And that's where AI comes in. It can analyze vast amounts of data, your genetic profile, your medical history, your lifestyle habits, all to predict how you might respond to a particular treatment.
So it's like having a personalized medicine consultant at your fingertips. tailoring treatments to your individual needs.
That's a great way to put it. And AI can also help monitor your progress on a treatment, adjusting dosages or even switching medications if needed, all in real time.
That's pretty mind-blowing. So we've got AI speeding up drug discovery and personalizing treatments. It sounds like a win-win for both patients and researchers. But what about the human side of things? With all this technology taking center stage, are we forgetting about the importance of the patient experience?
That's a crucial point, and thankfully, there's a growing movement within clinical research to put patients at the forefront. We call it patient centricity.
Okay, patient centricity. What does that actually look like in practice?
For starters, it means actively involving patients in the design of clinical trials, asking them what matters most to them, what outcomes they're hoping for, and what kind of support they need throughout the process.
That makes a lot of sense. It feels like in the past, trials were designed by scientists for scientists without much consideration for how it felt to actually be a participant.
You're right, and that often led to low participation rates and unreliable data. When patients feel heard and respected, they're more likely to stay engaged in the trial, which ultimately leads to better research.
So it's not just about being nice to patients. It's about recognizing that they're partners in the research process. Their insights and experiences are valuable data points.
Exactly. And patient centricity extends beyond trial design. It also means providing clear and accessible information about the trial, ensuring informed consent, and supporting patients throughout the journey, addressing their concerns, and making sure they feel comfortable every step of the way.
It's about creating a more human and empathetic research experience, recognizing that behind all the data points are real people with real lives.
Absolutely. Yeah. And this shift towards patient centricity, it's also reflected in the evolving regulatory landscape. For example, the ICH E6R3 guidelines, which are international standards for conducting clinical trials. They now emphasize the importance of incorporating patient perspectives throughout the research process.
So it's becoming less about treating patients as passive subjects and more about empowering them as active participants.
Precisely. And I think that's a really positive development. When patients are engaged and empowered, everyone benefits.
This is all fascinating, but it's a lot to take in. Before we move on, can we just recap the key trends we've covered so far?
Of course, we've talked about decentralized clinical trials, or DCTs, which are bringing research into people's homes using technology. We've explored the transformative potential of artificial intelligence, or AI, in drug discovery and personalized medicine. And we've discussed the growing importance of patient centricity, which is about placing patients at the heart of the research process.
Wow, that's quite a lot, and we're just getting started now. I know you mentioned something called real-world evidence, or RWE. What's that all about, and how does it fit into this bigger picture of clinical trial transformation?
RWE. It's a fascinating and rapidly evolving field. It's about moving beyond the controlled environment of traditional clinical trials and gathering data from real-life settings.
Okay, that sounds interesting, but can you give me a concrete example of what you mean by real-world data?
Sure. Imagine you're trying to understand the long-term effectiveness of a new diabetes medication. In a traditional clinical trial, you might track participants for a few months, monitoring their blood sugar levels and looking for any side effects.
That makes sense. You're creating a controlled environment to isolate the effects of the drug.
Exactly. But what happens after those few months? How does the drug perform in the messy reality of people's lives? Do they continue taking it as prescribed? Do they experience any unexpected side effects down the road?
Those are important questions, and I guess a traditional trial wouldn't necessarily capture those nuances.
That's right. And that's where RWB comes in. It allows us to gather data from sources like electronic health records, insurance claims, patient-reported outcomes, even social media posts, to get a more holistic picture of how a treatment performs in the real world.
So it's like taking a wide-angle lens to healthcare data, capturing not just the clinical data points, but also the social, behavioral, and environmental factors that influence people's health.
Exactly. And RWE is becoming increasingly valuable for a couple of reasons. First, it allows us to study treatments over a longer period of time, giving us a better understanding of their long-term effectiveness and safety.
So we're not just looking at the immediate effects, but also the bigger picture of how a treatment impacts people's lives over time. That's crucial.
It is. And second, RWE can help us understand how treatments work in diverse populations.
So we're back to that issue of representation. Traditional trials often struggle to enroll diverse participants, which limits our understanding of how treatments might work for different groups of people.
Precisely. But RWE can draw on data from a much broad, maybe you'll be part of the next big discovery.
Beautifully said. Until next time, keep learning.